The Galactic Military Academy's mess hall assault, every sense at once. Steam from 100 different worlds' cuisines created a fog that the ventilation systems struggled to manage. The cacophony of clicking mandibles, ultrasonic whistles, and guttural rumbles formed an alien symphony that would drive most single-species gatherings insane. Darius Kell moved through it all with the confidence of someone who'd never truly been tested. His reptilian scales caught the harsh overhead lighting, shifting from deep emerald to black as he walked. 6 feet 4 inches of muscle and arrogance, top of his class in combat theory, undefeated in his species' traditional wrestling forms. His tail swayed behind him, a subconscious display of dominance that his fellow Saurians would recognize. "Look at that," he said to his cohort. A mixed group of equally young, equally untested recruits. His forked tongue flicked out, tasting the air. The Earthling sitting alone. Again. Lena Carter sat at the far corner table, the one beneath the broken light panel that maintenance never seemed to fix. 5'3", maybe 120 pounds soaking wet. Her dark hair tied back in a regulation bun. She hunched over a tray of what the Academy claimed was Earth food, some kind of protein paste shaped to vaguely resemble meat, synthetic vegetables that had never seen soil, and a cup of coffee that probably contained more stimulants than coffee beans. "Leave it alone, Darius," warned Crix. His insectoid roommate. 4 arms meant Crix could eat and gesture nervously at the same time. Commander Ralcor said we need to work together, Darius interrupted. "How can we work together if they keep isolating themselves? I'm going to invite her to sit with us. Properly." The way he said properly should have been a warning. The way his scales shifted to a deeper shade of green should have been another. But his cohort was young, and in the Academy, social dynamics often played out through displays of strength. Darius approached Lena's table with the kind of swagger that came from never having faced a real predator. She didn't look up from her meal, though her shoulders shifted, almost imperceptibly. A human observer might have noticed the subtle change in her breathing pattern, the slight adjustment in how she held her fork. "Earthling," Darius announced, loud enough for half the mess hall to hear. "You dishonor the Academy by sitting alone. Join us at a proper table." Lena took another bite of her protein paste, chewed slowly, swallowed. "No, thank you," she said quietly, still not looking up. "I'm fine here." The dismissal stung worse than an insult would have. Darius's tail lashed once, twice. Several nearby tables had gone quiet, various species watching with the universal fascination of those witnessing potential drama. "You misunderstand," Darius said, leaning closer. His shadow fell across her tray. "I wasn't asking." He reached for her arm. It was meant to be a firm grip, just enough to establish dominance, to make her stand and follow. The kind of gesture that among Saurians would establish social hierarchy without real violence. His clawed hand moved with the speed that made his species formidable warriors, covering the distance in a blink. He never actually made contact. The mess hall's security footage, reviewed later, would show the entire sequence lasted 430 milliseconds. Lena's left hand intercepted his wrist, while her right drove upward into his elbow joint. His arm hyperextended with a wet crack that the audio sensors picked up clearly. Her body pivoted, using his own momentum against him. Her grip shifted to his shoulder, thumb finding the nerve cluster that Saurians didn't even know they shared with Earth mammals. Darius Kell, pride of the 2nd Saurian Battle Legion, found himself face down on the metal floor with his shoulder dislocated and his arm twisted at an angle that would make even the medical staff wince. Lena never stood up, never stopped eating. Her left hand still held him in a lock that had him whimpering, a sound no Saurian warrior should ever make in public. "I said," she repeated, taking another bite with her free hand. "No, thank you." The mess hall had gone completely silent. 200 pairs of eyes, compound and simple, watched as she held the lock for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to make her point, not long enough to cause permanent damage, then released him. Darius tried to push himself up with his good arm, failed, and collapsed back to the floor. His shoulder made sounds shoulders shouldn't make. Green blood, not much, just a trickle from where his scales had scraped the floor, marked his path as 2 of his cohort rushed to help him. "Medical," Lena said, finally looking directly at him. Her eyes were brown, ordinary brown, but something in them made every predator instinct in the room fire at once. "You'll want to go to medical. Tell Dr. Shavik it's a posterior dislocation with probable rotator cuff involvement. She'll know what that means." She returned to her meal as if nothing had happened. Around her, the mess hall slowly returned to life, but the noise was different now, subdued, thoughtful. The lone human continued eating her substandard earth food in her broken light corner, while Darius was half carried, half dragged to the medical bay, his shoulder grinding with every step. The story would spread through the academy within an hour. By the end of the day, it would reach the senior staff. By the end of the week, it would change everything. But in that moment, Lena Carter just wanted to finish her coffee in peace. It was the only thing from Earth the academy got almost right, and she'd be damned if she let it get cold. The mess hall's various species gave her table a wider berth for the rest of the meal period. Nobody else tried to invite her to sit anywhere. And, in the observation deck high above, Commander Raul Kor watched the security footage for the 5th time, mandibles clicking in what his species would recognize as satisfaction. "Phase 1, he murmured to himself. Complete. The medical bay smelled of ozone and organic disinfectant, a combination that somehow managed to be unpleasant to every species in the galaxy. Dr. Shavik moved between the biobeds with practiced efficiency, all 6 arms working independently. One pair managed the tissue regenerator, another input data into the medical logs, while the third poured what she claimed was tea, but looked suspiciously like motor oil. "Posterior dislocation with rotator cuff involvement," she said, not looking up from her screens. Your human was remarkably precise in her diagnosis. She even specified the angle of displacement. 23 degrees inferior, 41 degrees posterior, exact to the decimal. Darius lay on the biobed, scales pale green with pain and humiliation. The tissue regenerator hummed as it worked to repair the damage, but nothing could repair his pride. Through the transparent aluminum window, he could see curious faces pressed against the glass. Word had spread. How he managed through gritted teeth. "She weighs nothing. Her muscle density is inferior. The calculations don't—" "The calculations," Dr. Shavik interrupted, her compound eyes reflecting his image 1,000 times over. "Assume you understand what you're calculating. Tell me, young Saurian, what do you know about Deathworlders?" "Propaganda," Darius hissed. "Stories to make humans seem more dangerous than they are." The doctor's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or pity. "Computer, display medical scan. Subject Darius Kell. Time index -2 hours. A hologram materialized above the biobed, showing Darius's skeleton and musculature in painful detail. His shoulder joint glowed angry red. "Now," Dr. Shavik continued, "display comparative analysis. Subject human female. Standard parameters." A second hologram appeared. Smaller. Definitely lighter. But there was something about the muscle fiber density, the way the tendons attached, the structure of the joints themselves. "Humans evolved on a Category 12 death world," the doctor explained, manipulating the holograms with 2 of her hands. "Gravity, 1.3 times galactic standard. Atmospheric oxygen that fluctuates wildly. Tectonic instability. Weather patterns that can kill. Predators that hunt in packs. Microscopic organisms that eat them from the inside. Even their own star tries to give them cancer." She zoomed in on the human muscle structure. "Every fiber is designed for explosive movement. Their reflexes process threats faster than most species process conscious thought. Their joints are reinforced to handle impacts that would shatter your bones. And that's just the baseline model. The door chimed. Darius's heart sank as Lena Carter walked in, still in her training uniform, not a hair out of place. "Dr. Shavik," she said with a slight nod. "How's the patient?" "Educating himself," the doctor replied dryly. "Though I suspect you could provide better instruction." Lena approached the biobed, and Darius had to fight not to flinch. Up close, without the adrenaline of the moment, she looked even less threatening. Brown eyes that Earth poets probably called warm. Skin without scales or natural armor. No claws. No fangs visible when she spoke. "I need to apologize," she said. And Darius blinked in surprise. "I used more force than necessary. It's been a while since I've had to recalibrate for training scenarios versus actual threats." "Recalibrate," Darius managed. She tilted her head slightly. On Earth, that grip would have been considered restraint, minimal force. But I forgot. What's minimal for a human can be excessive for others. I'm still learning to adjust. "Show him," Dr. Shavik suggested, a note of mischief in her voice. "The stress ball exercise." Lena looked uncertain for a moment, then picked up what appeared to be a standard grip strength tester from the medical equipment tray. The device was rated for most species in the galaxy, maxing out at 500 psi. She squeezed it casually, one-handed, while maintaining eye contact with Darius. The digital display climbed rapidly, 100, 200, 300, 400. At 450, the device began making uncomfortable sounds. She stopped. "That's about 60%, she said, setting it down. "Maybe 65. The one in the gym is rated higher, but it's calibrated for humans, so the numbers don't translate well." Darius stared at the device, then at her hand. No visible strain, no trembling. She might as well have been holding a cup of that coffee she seemed to favor. "But the real advantage isn't strength," Lena continued, and there was something almost sad in her voice. "It's that we grew up expecting everything to try to kill us. A saurian child who falls learns to avoid falling. A human child who falls learns to fall better, to roll with impacts, to protect vital organs instinctively, to get back up even when things break." She gestured to his shoulder. "When you reached for me, my body categorized it as a threat before my conscious mind even registered movement. The response was automatic, trained into me since I could walk. Not because humans are violent, but because on Earth, the half-second between threat recognition and response is the difference between life and death." The door chimed again, and Commander Raul Kor entered. The Arthonian commander stood 8 feet tall on 6 segmented legs, his chitinous exterior reflecting the medical bay's harsh lighting. His 4 arms were clasped behind him, in what humans would recognize as parade rest. "Recruit Kell," the commander's voice resonated from his thoracic cavity. "Recruit Carter, Dr. Shavik." All 3 straightened, though Darius winced at the movement. "Sir," Lena said, "I take full responsibility for—" "You take responsibility for a textbook defensive response to unwanted physical contact." The commander's head tilted, compound eyes focusing on her. "Interesting. In my 300 years of military service, I've never seen someone apologize for proper threat response." He turned to Darius. "You, however, will take responsibility for initiating unauthorized physical contact with a fellow recruit. When you recover, you will serve as the demonstration subject for a new training module on interspecies combat dynamics." Darius's scales went pale. "Sir, you wanted to understand human capabilities. You'll help everyone understand. Consider it educational." The commander's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Recruit Carter will be your instructor. You'll demonstrate, repeatedly, why no one should grab a Deathworlder without permission." "Sir," Lena protested, "that seems excessive." What's excessive, the commander interrupted, is that we've integrated humans into the galactic military for 50 standard years without proper education on their capabilities. Do you know how many incidents we've had? How many unnecessary injuries from people who thought humans were easy targets because they're small and soft? He pulled up a holographic display from his wrist unit. Statistics scrolled past. Injury reports, incident files. Each one a variation on the same theme. Someone underestimated a human and paid for it. Earth sent their people to the stars to help, the commander continued. To be part of something bigger. And we treat them like they're weak because they don't have natural weapons. Because they're small. Because they're polite enough not to constantly remind us that they come from a world that makes our worst prison planets look like resort destinations. Dr. Shavik had gone very still, all 6 arms frozen in place. Commander, are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. Doctor, I'm implementing a new training requirement. Every recruit in this academy will complete a course on Deathworlder species, with particular focus on humans. We'll cover evolutionary history, physiological capabilities, psychological profiles, and most importantly, why you should never, ever grab one without warning. He turned back to Darius. You'll be healed in 6 hours. Rest today. Tomorrow. You and Recruit Carter will begin developing the curriculum. You'll use your experience as a case study. Together, Darius couldn't hide his dismay. Together. The commander's tone left no room for argument. Unless you'd prefer to explain to the review board why you assaulted a fellow recruit in the mess hall, the security footage is quite clear. You approached aggressively, made verbal threats, and initiated unwanted physical contact. On most worlds, Recruit Carter would be within her rights to file charges. The medical bay fell silent except for the hum of the tissue regenerator. She won't file charges, the commander continued, because humans have this peculiar trait called being understanding. They recognize that you acted from ignorance, not malice, but ignorance in the military gets people killed. So, we're going to fix that ignorance, and you're going to help. He moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Recruit Kell. That thing humans say about learning from mistakes, they mean it literally. Every mistake is data. Every failure is education. Your failure today will save lives tomorrow. Try to remember that when your shoulder aches. As the commander left, Lena turned to Darius. For what it's worth, I really am sorry about your shoulder. I know how much Saurian culture values physical prowess. Being injured like this, publicly, must be devastating. Darius wanted to maintain his anger, his humiliation, but something in her tone made it impossible. She actually understood. This small, soft creature, who had destroyed him without effort, actually understood what this meant to him. How? He asked quietly. How do you do it live on a world that wants to kill you? Come from that and still be... He struggled for the word. Kind? Lena smiled, and for the first time, Darius noticed the thin scar that ran along her jawline. A story there, certainly. Because the alternative is letting the harsh environment make us harsh too. Earth taught us to be strong. We had to teach ourselves to be gentle. It's a choice we make every day. She paused. Tomorrow, when we start working together, I'll teach you something my instructor taught me: the difference between being dangerous and being cruel. One is sometimes necessary. The other never is. She left then, and Darius was alone with Dr. Shavik and his thoughts. The tissue regenerator continued its work, knitting bone and muscle back together. But something else was being reconstructed too, his entire understanding of strength, of power, of what it meant to be a warrior in a galaxy bigger and stranger than he'd imagined. Doctor, he said finally, tell me more about Deathworlders. Dr. Shavik's mandibles clicked in what was definitely amusement this time. Oh, young Saurian, where do I even begin? The tactical training dome, stretched 300 meters in diameter, its walls lined with holographic projectors, capable of creating any environment from any known world. Today, it remained stark white and empty, except for the raised observation platform where 200 recruits from 40 different species had gathered. Darius stood in the center of the dome, his newly healed shoulder rotating uncomfortably. The medical treatment had repaired the physical damage, but phantom pain lingered. Or perhaps it was just anxiety. Beside him, Lena Carter looked relaxed, almost bored, wearing standard training gear that seemed 2 sizes too big for her frame. "Your attention!" Commander Ralcor's voice echoed through the dome. The Arthonian stood at the observation platform's edge, his reflection multiplied across the polished floor. "Today marks the first session of the Interspecies Combat Dynamics course. You will observe, you will learn, you will understand why assumptions kill." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered something about the human girl who broke Kell. Darius's scales flushed darker. "First demonstration," the commander continued. "Standard combat speeds. Recruit Carter, Recruit Brooks. You may begin." Evan Brooks jogged out from the preparation area, where Lena was small and unassuming. Evan stood 6 feet tall with the build of someone who'd grown up in higher gravity. His dark skin bore scars that told stories, and his movements had the economy of someone who'd learned not to waste energy. "Brooks," Lena nodded. "Carter," he replied. "Rules. 30% contact allowed, submission or points. Points, 3 minutes." They took positions 10 meters apart. No ceremony, no ritual poses that many species favored. They simply stood there, weight balanced, breathing steady. "Begin," the commander announced. They moved. To the watching recruits, it must have looked like teleportation. One moment they were standing still. The next, they were colliding in the center. The impact sound reached the observation deck a fraction of a second after the visual. A meaty thud that made several observers flinch. Lena had gone low, shooting for Evan's legs, but he'd read the telegraph in her shoulders and sprawled backward, his weight driving down onto her spine. She rolled through it, somehow reversing position mid-motion, and suddenly, Evan was airborne, flipping over her shoulder. He landed on his feet. Impossible, Darius thought. That recovery should have been impossible, and immediately launched backward, his elbows seeking her temple. She wasn't there anymore, having dropped and spun, her legs sweeping where his ankles had been a heartbeat before. "Analysis mode," Dr. Shavik announced from her position at the medical station. A holographic overlay appeared above the fighters, showing their movements in slow motion. "Note the reaction times. Recruit Brooks begins his dodge 43 milliseconds after Recruit Carter initiates her attack. For comparison, Altarian combat pilots, our fastest recorded reflexes, average 70 milliseconds. The fight continued below. They moved in patterns that seemed chaotic but had their own logic. Every attack flowed into defense, every defense into a counter. When they grappled, their bodies contorted in ways that made several reptilian species wince. Joints bent to their limits, but never quite beyond. Evan caught Lena's arm in what looked like a solid lock, but she dislocated her own shoulder, deliberately, smoothly, slipped free, and popped it back into place while driving her knee into his solar plexus. He took the hit, used the momentum to create distance, and reset. Humans can consciously dislocate and relocate joints, Dr. Shavik noted clinically. They also have redundant pain suppression pathways. What would incapacitate most species merely informs them of damage to root around. The timer showed 1 minute 30 seconds. Both fighters were breathing harder now, sweat making their skin shine under the dome's lights. To the watchers, they still moved impossibly fast. But Darius was beginning to see the patterns, the way they tracked each other's center of gravity, the micro-movements that telegraphed major attacks, the constant calculation of distance, angle, leverage. Lena fainted high, and went low again, this time succeeding in wrapping Evan's leg. They went to the ground, and that's when the real education began. Ground fighting was considered primitive by most spacefaring species. Why wrestle in dirt when you had weapons that could kill at a distance? But watching the two humans grapple was like watching water flow uphill. They moved through positions that shouldn't exist, applying pressure to joints that other species didn't know could bend that way. "Time," the commander announced. They separated immediately, helping each other up with no animosity. Both were breathing hard, shirts soaked with sweat, but they were smiling. Actually smiling. "Points?" Evan asked. "Carter by 2, the commander replied, though Brooks had superior position control in the final 40 seconds. They bumped fists, some human gesture Darius didn't understand, and turned to face the observation deck. "Questions?" Lena asked, not even trying to hide her exhaustion. A Rigellan with 4 eyes raised a tentacle. "That was 30%. "About that," Evan confirmed, wiping sweat from his face. "Maybe 35 at the peaks. Full speed would risk permanent injury, even with safety equipment." "Show them," Commander Ralcor ordered. "One burst, full speed, no contact." The two humans exchanged glances, then nodded. They returned to starting positions. 3 seconds, Lena said. "Closing pattern only." "Agreed. On your mark." She dropped into a slight crouch. "Mark." The observation deck's high-speed cameras would later show that they crossed the 10-meter gap in 0.3 seconds. Their closing velocity exceeded 40 kilometers per hour. When they stopped, millimeters from contact. Lena's fist frozen a hair's breadth from Evan's throat, his knee hovering just shy of her ribs. The displacement of air created a visible shockwave. Several recruits stepped back from the railing. Crix, Darius's insectoid roommate, made a sound that might have been prayer. "Deathworlders," Commander Ralcor said into the silence. "Now, let's discuss why Recruit Kell is fortunate to still have a functioning shoulder." The lights dimmed, and holographic projections filled the space. Earth appeared, rotating slowly. But it was Earth as the galaxy understood it, a ball of violent weather, tectonic chaos, and biological warfare. "Recruit Carter," the commander continued. "Explain your home." Lena straightened, still catching her breath. "Earth sits in what we call the Goldilocks zone. Not too hot, not too cold." "Sounds perfect, right?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That just means liquid water. Liquid water means weather. Weather means hurricanes that can destroy entire coastlines, tornadoes that can punch holes through mountains, storms that can flood valleys in minutes." The projection shifted, showing Earth's tectonic plates. "Active geology." Evan picked up the narrative. "Earthquakes that level cities, volcanoes that blot out the sun, tsunamis that can travel across entire oceans. And that's just the planet itself." Images of Earth's fauna appeared. Not the charismatic megafauna that appeared in diplomatic presentations, but the real threats. Microscopic organisms that could eat through flesh, insects that injected neurotoxins, pack hunters with sophisticated communication, ambush predators that had evolved near-perfect camouflage. "Everything on Earth evolved in competition," Lena explained. "Plants develop poisons, animals develop immunity, predators get faster, prey gets smarter. For 4 billion years, it's been an arms race where standing still means extinction." "And humans?" The question came from a Centaurian near the back. "We're not the strongest," Lena admitted. "Not the fastest. No claws, no venom, no natural armor. But we're adaptable. We sweat. That means we can run longer than anything else on our planet. We can eat almost anything. We heal from injuries that would kill most Earth species. And we're smart enough to turn everything else into weapons." "The most important adaptation," Evan added, "is social. A single human is dangerous. A group of humans. That's how we became the apex predator on a world full of apex predators." Commander Ralcor gestured, and new images appeared. Human children, maybe 5 or 6 years old, playing something called rugby. This is what humans consider appropriate activity for their young, the commander noted. Full contact, minimal protection. Injuries are expected and treated as learning experiences. The children in the video collided with forces that would hospitalize most species youth. They got up. They kept playing. One had blood running from their nose and seemed annoyed more than hurt. By age 10, the commander continued, human children are taught to swim in oceans filled with predators, to climb rock faces without safety equipment, to navigate wilderness alone. They call it camping and do it for fun. Darius found himself speaking before he could stop himself. How do any of you survive to adulthood? Lena turned to him, and for the first time since the mess hall incident, she looked genuinely amused. We don't, always, but the ones who do are very hard to kill, and we learn. Every death teaches the survivors what not to do. Every injury becomes tribal knowledge. We're not individually superior, we're collectively unstoppable. Recruit Kell, the commander said. Join them in the demonstration area. Darius's scales went pale, but he descended from the platform. Each step felt like walking toward an execution. We're going to demonstrate something important, the commander announced. The difference between human civilian self-defense and human military combat. Recruit Carter, show them what you did in the mess hall. Quarter speed for visibility. Darius reluctantly reached for Lena's arm. Much slower this time. She responded with the same technique, intercepting his wrist, driving into his elbow, pivoting his shoulder. At quarter speed, everyone could see the biomechanics. How she used his own skeletal structure against him. How every joint became a lever. Every muscle's attachment point to weakness. This is civilian self-defense, she explained, holding the position. Minimal damage, maximum control. It's designed to stop an attacker without killing them. We teach this to our children. She released him and reset. Now, the commander said, military application, no contact, just movement. Lena's entire demeanor changed. Her stance lowered. Her eyes went flat. And Darius felt every predator alarm in his evolutionary history start screaming. She moved through the same initial interception, but instead of controlling, her free hand went to where his eyes would be. Her knee drove toward his groin. The arm lock transformed into a spiral that would have shattered his elbow, dislocated his shoulder, and driven him face first into the ground. The follow-through positioned her to stomp on his spine. All of it in less than 2 seconds, even at demonstration speed. The mess hall was a kindness, she said quietly. Remember that. Dr. Shavik's voice filled the sudden silence. For medical context, the military variation would have resulted in 14 separate injuries, 6 of them potentially fatal to a Saurian. Recovery time with our best regenerative technology, 3 weeks. Without it, permanent disability. This concludes the first lesson, Commander Ralcor announced. You've seen what humans can do when they're playing nice, when they're demonstrating, when they're teaching. If any of you ever see a human in actual combat, not sparring, not training, but real life or death combat, your best option is to be on their side. Your second best option is to be very far away. The recruits filed out slowly, conversations in dozens of languages creating a buzzing cacophony. Many kept glancing back at the 2 humans who were now sitting on the dome floor, sharing a water bottle and discussing technique like they hadn't just shattered every assumption about human fragility. Darius started to leave, then stopped. He turned back. Carter, he called out. Tomorrow, the curriculum planning. What time? She looked up at him, evaluating. 0600. Bring coffee if you want me coherent. Coffee. Stimulant beverage. Probably toxic to you. Definitely necessary for me. Evan laughed. She's not joking. Humans have a complicated relationship with alkaloid poisons. We drink them for fun. Darius nodded slowly. 0600, with coffee. As he left, he heard Evan ask Lena, Think he'll actually show Yeah, she replied. He's proud, but he's not stupid. And proud beings hate staying ignorant more than they hate admitting they were wrong. Darius pretended not to hear, but his tail swayed in what his species would recognize as acknowledgement. Tomorrow would be interesting, painful, probably, educational, certainly. But for the first time since arriving at the academy, he was actually looking forward to learning something new. The rehabilitation center occupied the academy's east wing, its walls transparent aluminum, offering a view of the binary sunrise over the training grounds. Darius arrived at 0545, carrying what the dispensary assured him was coffee suitable for human consumption. The smell made his secondary nostrils seal shut involuntarily. Lena was already there, working through what she called physical therapy exercises. Her movements were slow, deliberate, each position held for precisely calibrated intervals. To anyone watching, it might have looked like a dance. To Darius's newly educated eye, it was a systematic test of every joint, tendon, and muscle group. "You're early," she observed, not breaking form. Saurians value punctuality. He set the coffee container on the nearest surface, maintaining what he hoped was a safe distance. "Though I question your species' relationship with toxic beverages." She completed her routine and walked over, picking up the container. The first sip made her close her eyes in something that looked dangerously close to religious experience. "Perfect," she said. "The dispensary usually makes it too weak. How'd you know the right concentration?" "I asked Dr. Shavik," she said, and I quote, "Make it strong enough to dissolve metal, then double it." Lena laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her face. "She's not wrong. All right, let's get started. Computer, display workspace configuration 7. The room reconfigured, walls shifting to create projection surfaces while furniture emerged from the floor. Within seconds, they had a fully functional planning center. "First thing you need to understand," Lena began, pulling up anatomical displays, "is that humans aren't trying to be dangerous. We just are. It's not superiority or aggression. It's 4 billion years of evolutionary pressure." She gestured to a comparison chart, showing various species' baseline capabilities. "Look at this. Altarians have faster reflexes in burst situations. Saurians are stronger in raw lifting power. Kandorians have better endurance in low oxygen environments. Every species has advantages. But humans have a different advantage. We're generalists who survived by being good enough at everything. Not the best at any one thing, but competent across all categories. And we're adaptable. Put a human in any environment and within a generation, we'll have figured out how to thrive there." Darius studied the charts, his analytical mind processing the data. "Your muscle fiber composition is unusual. Fast twitch and slow twitch in nearly equal distribution. Because we needed both. Sprint from predators, but also persistence hunt prey. Climb trees to escape, but also swim rivers. Our ancestors had to do everything, so we evolved to be capable of everything." They worked for an hour, building the foundation of the curriculum. Darius found himself contributing more than he'd expected, his theoretical knowledge complementing Lena's practical experience. When she demonstrated grip positions, he provided the mathematical models for force distribution. When he identified vulnerable points in Saurian anatomy, she showed him the human equivalents. "Can I ask you something?" Darius said during a break, watching her consume her third cup of coffee. "Shoot. Why didn't you file charges in the mess hall? The commander was right. You had grounds." Lena was quiet for a moment, staring into her cup. "Because I've been you. Not exactly, but close enough. My first year at Earth's military academy. I thought I was hot stuff. Top of my class in Texas. Undefeated in my weight division. Then I tried to prove something to someone who'd been fighting since they could walk." She pulled up her sleeve, revealing a surgical scar running from elbow to wrist. "Compound fracture. 3 surgeries. 6 months of rehabilitation. And you know what my instructor said when I finally returned to training. Darius waited. He said, "Good. Now you're ready to learn. Because until you've been humbled, really humbled, you can't set aside ego enough to actually improve." So humiliating me was kindness. Education. The humiliation was just a side effect. Though I am sorry about that. Public defeat is hard for any warrior culture. Darius's tail swayed in contemplation. My clan would disagree. They'd say public defeat is the greatest teacher because it prevents private delusion. Smart clan. They returned to work. And Darius found himself sharing more than he'd intended. Stories of Saurian combat philosophy, their concepts of honorable warfare, the ritual battles that determine leadership. Lena listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she was truly trying to understand. "Your turn," he said eventually. "Tell me about human warfare, not the techniques, the philosophy." Lena leaned back, considering. Humans have a saying, "If you find yourself in a fair fight, your tactics suck." We don't believe in honorable combat when lives are at stake. We believe in winning, preferably without fighting at all. That seems contradictory. Not really. Sun Tzu, ancient human strategist, said the supreme excellence is defeating an enemy without fighting. We'll use ambush, deception, psychological warfare, anything that ends conflict with minimal casualties. But if we have to fight, she shrugged, we fight to end it decisively. No honor in that. The honor is in protecting those who can't protect themselves, in ending conflicts quickly to minimize suffering, in rebuilding after the fighting stops. She pulled up historical images. Every major human conflict ended with the victors helping rebuild the defeated. Marshall Plan, Japanese Reconstruction, the Montreal Accords. We're the only species we know of that consistently does this. Why? Because today's enemy might be tomorrow's ally. And because... She paused, searching for words. Because we know what we're capable of. We've seen what happens when humans stop seeing each other as human. So when the fighting ends, we make sure to remember everyone's humanity again. The workspace door chimed. Dr. Shavik entered, all 6 arms carrying various pieces of medical equipment. "Continuing education time," she announced. "Recruit Kel needs to understand human recovery patterns if he's going to help teach this course." She set up what looked like a medical scanner. "Recruit Carter, if you would demonstrate your recovery from yesterday's demonstration." Lena stood in the scanner field, while holographic displays showed her biological readings. Darius watched in fascination as the data streamed past. "Note the microtears in the muscle fiber," Dr. Shavik indicated with 2 of her arms. "In most species, this represents significant damage requiring medical intervention. In humans, they're already healing," Darius observed. "The tissue is actually rebuilding stronger. Humans call it hypertrophy," Lena explained. "Controlled damage that triggers improved reconstruction. It's why human athletes deliberately hurt themselves to get stronger. We literally break down our bodies and rebuild them better." "That's insane," Darius said without thinking, then caught himself. "I mean..." "No, you're right," Lena laughed. "It is insane, but it works. Every workout is controlled destruction. Every recovery makes us harder to break next time." Dr. Shavik pulled up additional scans. "This extends to bone density, neural pathways, even psychological resilience. Humans exposed to stress develop higher stress tolerance. They're saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, is literally accurate for their species." "But there must be limits," Darius insisted. "Of course," Lena agreed. "Push too hard, too fast, without recovery, and we break, permanently sometimes. The trick is finding the edge without going over it." They spent the next hour going through recovery protocols, comparing human and saurian healing patterns, identifying safe training parameters for interspecies combat exercises. Darius found himself impressed by how much thought went into what seemed like simple activities. "Tomorrow we'll need to present this to the commander," Lena said as they wrapped up. "You ready for that?" "To present, yes. To demonstrate again, my shoulder says no." "We'll get Evan to be the crash test dummy this time. He loves that stuff." As they gathered their materials, Darius found himself asking, "That thing humans do, the fist bump. What does it mean?" Lena smiled. "It's acknowledgement, respect between equals, warriors who've tested each other and found each other worthy." She held out her fist. Darius looked at it for a moment, then carefully touched his scaled knuckles to hers. "Getting there," she said. "Tomorrow we'll work on the cultural components. Every species has their own way of showing respect. Part of working together is learning to recognize them all." As Darius left, he realized something had shifted. The human wasn't the dangerous alien anymore. She was a colleague, maybe even something approaching a friend. And if that could happen after their disastrous first meeting, maybe the curriculum they were building could actually work. Behind him, he heard Lena call out, "Same time tomorrow. Bring more coffee." "Your toxic addiction will be accommodated," he replied, surprising himself with the attempt at humor. Her laughter followed him down the corridor, and for the first time since arriving at the academy, Darius felt like he understood something fundamental. Strength wasn't about domination. It was about knowing when not to use it. The mixed training session was scheduled for the main combat arena, a space large enough to accommodate full-scale tactical exercises. Word had spread through the academy about the new curriculum, and the viewing galleries were packed with curious observers from every division. Darius stood with Lena at the edge of the arena floor, watching the participants warm up. 3 weeks had passed since they'd started teaching together, and their dynamic had evolved from awkward cooperation to something approaching synchronized instruction. "Trouble incoming," Lena murmured, not changing her relaxed posture. Darius followed her gaze. A group of Kandorian recruits had entered the arena, led by Thrix, whose reputation for aggressive dominance games was well known. The Kandorians were silicon-based life forms, their crystalline bodies naturally armored, and their strength legendary even by galactic standards. "Vel's been talking," Darius said quietly. "Says the human demonstrations are staged, that you use some kind of performance enhancers. Let me guess, he wants a real test. With you specifically, he's been saying things about human females being even weaker than the males." Lena's expression didn't change, but Darius had learned to read the subtle tension in her shoulders. "How many followers does he have?" "6 here, more in the upper divisions. And they're all heading this way." Thrix stood nearly 8 feet tall, his crystalline form refracting the arena lights into rainbow patterns. Beautiful and deadly, like a walking geological formation with conscious intent. His followers spread out in a semicircle, a classic intimidation formation. "Human Carter," Thrix's voice resonated like grinding stone. "I challenge your teaching credentials. You've shown us tricks in theater, not combat." The arena had gone quiet. Even the recruits who'd been warming up stopped to watch. "Recruit Vel," Lena responded calmly. "The demonstrations are educational tools. They're not meant to—" "Weakness," Thrix interrupted. "You hide behind words because you know against real opponents. Your species is prey." Darius felt his scales heat with anger. Over the past weeks, he'd seen Lena hold back repeatedly, always teaching rather than dominating, always de-escalating rather than destroying. These fools had no idea what they were asking for. "Recruit Vel," Darius stepped forward. "You're out of line. The curriculum has been approved by—" "I don't recognize a failed warrior's authority." Thrix dismissed him. "Everyone knows you got soft after the human broke you." The insult was calculated, designed to provoke. 3 weeks ago, it would have worked. Now, Darius simply smiled, showing all his teeth. "You're right," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "She did break me, in 400 milliseconds, without standing up, while eating lunch, and she was being gentle. He turned to address the growing crowd. I was exactly like Recruit Vel, confident, untested, convinced that size and strength were all that mattered. Carter could have killed me. Instead, she taught me. That's what humans do. They teach you to be better, right up until you prove you won't learn. Then what Thrix demanded. Darius looked at Lena. She was still calm, still controlled, but something had shifted in her stance. The predator was waking up. Then they stopped being teachers, Darius said quietly. Recruit Vel. Lena's voice carried across the arena without shouting. You want a demonstration? Fine. Choose your terms. Thrix's crystalline structure brightened with satisfaction. Full contact, submission, or unconsciousness. No restrictions. Lena. Evan Brooks had appeared from somewhere, concern evident on his face. Kandorians don't have pressure points. Their neural structure is distributed through their entire crystalline matrix. I know, she replied, not taking her eyes off Thrix. Counterproposal. You and your 6 followers versus me. Same terms. The arena erupted in shocked murmurs. 7 against 1 was considered dishonorable in most military traditions. Thrix laughed, a sound like an avalanche. You're insane! No, Lena said, finally smiling. I'm human. We're pack hunters. Remember, fighting groups is what we're designed for. Unless you're afraid. The challenge hung in the air. Thrix couldn't back down now without losing face. Arena controls. Commander Ralcor's voice boomed from the observation deck. Safety protocols at maximum. Medical teams on standby. This is now an official combat assessment. Recruit Vel. You and your associates have requested advanced combat testing. Request granted. Dr. Shavik's dry voice followed. For the record, I advised against this. Also, for the record, I've prepared 7 medical bays. The arena floor cleared. Thrix and his 6 followers took positions in a spread formation, attempting to surround Lena from the start. She stood in the center, still relaxed, still calm. Begin, the commander announced. The Kandorians moved like an avalanche given purpose. They didn't charge individually, but as a coordinated unit, using their superior mass and reach to compress the space around Lena. She moved, not toward any individual opponent, but through the gaps in their formation. The Kandorians were strong, but not particularly fast, their crystalline bodies trading agility for durability. Lena exploited this mercilessly. She slipped between 2 attackers, using one's body to block the other's line of sight. Her palm struck where a Kandorian's crystal structure met at what humans would call a joint. The impact was precise, sending vibrations through the crystalline matrix that disrupted neural pathways. The first Kandorian dropped, his body's light dimming as his consciousness flickered. Resonant frequency disruption, Dr. Shavik narrated for the medical record. The human identified the natural harmonic of Kandorian crystal structure and matched it. Remarkable. Thrix roared and swung a massive arm at Lena's head. She didn't dodge backward, but forward, inside his reach, her knee driving into what would be a knee on a human. The joint shattered, actually shattered, pieces of crystal scattering across the arena floor. Kandorians can regenerate crystal structure, Lena said conversationally, spinning away from another attacker. But it takes weeks, and it hurts. She picked up one of the crystal shards, and the watching crowd gasped. Using improvised weapons in a formal challenge was technically legal, but considered savage. Lena didn't use it as a weapon. She used it as a tuning fork. She struck it against the floor, and it rang with a clear, high note. 2 more Kandorians stumbled, their internal harmonics disrupted. In their moment of disorientation, Lena was among them. Precise strikes to structural weak points, using their own mass against them, turning their formation into a liability. 4 down, 3 to go. Thrix had stopped treating this as a dominance display. His movements now were desperate, survival-driven. He and his remaining followers tried to coordinate, but Lena was constantly moving, never where they expected, always exploiting the blind spots created by their own crystalline body's light refraction. "She's using their optical properties against them," someone in the crowd said in amazement. "Calculating refraction angles in real time." One more Kandorian fell to a strike that sent sympathetic vibrations through his entire structure. Another dropped when Lena managed to get behind him and apply torque to his cervical crystals until they cracked. Now it was just Thrix, and he was backing away. "Yield," Lena offered. "Never," he snarled, charging with everything he had. Lena didn't move until the last possible second. Then she dropped, swept his leg, the one she'd damaged earlier, and rose behind him as he fell. Her arm wrapped around his throat structure, and she spoke quietly enough that only he and the nearest recording devices could hear. "I could shatter your entire matrix from here. One specific frequency, amplified through direct contact. You'd spend months in regeneration tanks. Maybe never fully recover. Is your pride worth that?" Thrix struggled for a moment more, then went still. "I yield." Lena released him immediately, then did something that shocked everyone. She helped him up. "You fought well," she said, loud enough for all to hear. 7-on-1 coordination is difficult. With practice, your formation could have been much more effective. She turned to address the arena. "This is what you need to understand about humans. We don't want to fight you. We want to work with you, learn from you, teach what we know. But if you force us to fight, we'll use everything, your biology, your psychology, your assumptions, against you. Not because we're cruel, but because we're survivors." Darius watched as she helped the medical team load the injured Kandorians onto gurneys, checking each one's injuries with what appeared to be genuine concern. The same hands that had systematically dismantled 7 opponents now carefully ensured crystal fragments were collected for regeneration. "That's the real lesson," he said to anyone listening. "Humans are dangerous not because they're violent, but because they can choose when to be violent and when to be kind. And they're very, very good at both." Commander Ral Kor descended from the observation deck. "Recruit Vel, you and your associates are assigned to the Advanced Interspecies Combat Course. Mandatory attendance. Recruit Carter will be your primary instructor." Thrix, supported by medical staff, managed to nod. "Understood, sir." "And Recruit Vel," the commander added. "Next time you want to test a Deathworlder, remember that they've been tested by their own world for millions of years. You're not likely to present anything new." As the arena cleared, Lena slumped against a wall, exhaustion finally showing. Darius approached with water and a towel. "You okay?" "Fine," she said, though her hands were shaking slightly. "Adrenaline crash. Fighting multiple opponents is exhausting, even when they're predictable. You could have ended it faster." "Probably. But then they wouldn't have learned anything. Pain is a teacher, but humiliation just breeds resentment. They needed to understand, not just lose." Evan Brooks approached with Dr. Shavik. "The commander wants a full debrief. Also, the entire thing was recorded for the curriculum. How to fight multiple opponents, a human perspective." "Great," Lena groaned. "More teaching materials." "You did volunteer for this," Darius reminded her. "I volunteered to prevent misunderstandings, not to become the galaxy's crash test dummy for human capabilities." "Too late," Dr. Shavik said cheerfully. "You're now officially the most requested instructor at the Academy. Congratulations on your promotion to everyone's problem." As they walked toward the medical bay for Lena's mandatory post-combat examination, Darius noticed something. The other recruits weren't looking at her with fear anymore. It was respect, certainly, but also curiosity, understanding. The human demonstration had worked, not just in showing what humans could do, but in showing how they chose to do it, with restraint, with purpose, with an offer of friendship after the fighting was done. "Hey, Darius," Lena said as they walked. "Thanks for the backup earlier. With Thrix."
You didn't need it.
"No, but it mattered that you offered. That's what partners do." Partners. 3 weeks ago, the word would have been impossible. Now it felt right. "Same time tomorrow for curriculum review?" he asked. 0600. Don't forget the coffee. "Your addiction is noted and enabled." She laughed, and several passing recruits looked startled at the sound. The human who had just dismantled 7 Kandorians was laughing about coffee with the Saurian she'd humiliated weeks ago. The galaxy, Darius thought, was a strange and wonderful place. The graduation ceremony was 3 days away, and Darius was in the archive room reviewing footage for their final presentation. 6 months had passed since the incident in the mess hall, and the interspecies combat dynamics course was now mandatory for all recruits. He was scrolling through training videos when he found it. An encrypted file, dated the day before his first encounter with Lena. His curiosity piqued. Darius ran it through his personal decryption software, a skill he'd picked up from an Altarian hacker friend. The file opened, revealing security footage from Commander Ralcor's office. On the screen, the commander sat across from Lena Carter. The timestamp showed this was her first day at the academy. "Your scores are impressive," the commander was saying. "Top of every human military academy, advanced certifications in xenobiology and tactical psychology. You could have had any posting. Why here?" "Because humans need to stop being mysteries, sir," Lena replied. "Every incident report I've read stems from misunderstanding. Other species either dismiss us as weak or fear us as monsters. Neither is sustainable for galactic cooperation." "And your solution?" "Education through demonstration. But it has to be organic. If we just lecture about human capabilities, it's abstract. They need to experience it." The commander's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "You're proposing to let someone attack you, not let them encourage them." "I've reviewed the recruit profiles. Darius Kell is perfect, talented, arrogant, from a warrior culture that respects strength, but has never faced a Deathworlder. When he inevitably tries to establish dominance, you'll demonstrate why that's inadvisable." "And then teach him. Public defeat followed by patient education. His transformation will be more powerful than any lecture." Darius felt his scales shift through several colors as the implications hit him. The entire thing had been orchestrated. His humiliation, his education, his partnership with Lena, all of it planned. "You're certain he won't be permanently damaged?" the commander asked in the recording. "I've studied Saurian anatomy extensively. I can incapacitate without lasting harm. The shoulder will heal completely within hours with your medical technology. His pride will take longer, but that's necessary for growth. And if he doesn't learn, if he becomes vengeful, then we'll try someone else. But his psychological profile suggests he values knowledge over ego. Once the ego is properly challenged, he'll be an ideal co-instructor once he understands." The recording ended. Darius sat in the dark archive room, processing what he'd learned. He should have been furious. He'd been manipulated, used as a prop in their educational theater. Instead, he found himself thinking about the past 6 months, the dozens of species they'd trained, the incidents they'd prevented. Thrix Vel, who now served as an assistant instructor, teaching others about structural harmonics and combat adaptation. The 3 separate interspecies conflicts that had been resolved through the de-escalation techniques from their curriculum. His personal communication device chimed. A message from Lena. "Coffee machine broken in East Wing. Bringing extra from West. Don't let me face the morning briefing decaffeinated." Such a normal message, from someone who had orchestrated his complete reconstruction as a warrior and a being. Darius made a decision. The next morning, he arrived at their usual meeting spot with 2 containers of coffee and a third item. A traditional Saurian truth blade, ceremonial but functional. "What's this?" Lena asked, examining the blade with interest. In my culture, when someone has been deceived for their own benefit, they have the right to demand satisfaction or acknowledge wisdom. The deceived party presents a blade. If they offer it handle first, they acknowledge the deception was justified. If they offer it blade first, they're demanding blood, Lena finished. She looked at him steadily. You found the recording. The commander's security is inadequate for someone with the right skills. And Darius reversed the blade, offering her the handle. And I understand why you did it. But I need to know, was any of it real? The partnership? The friendship? Lena took the blade, then set it aside and met his eyes. The setup was planned. Everything after, the respect, the collaboration, the friendship, that was real. You exceeded every projection. We thought you'd be a good example. You became a great teacher.
You could have told me, after.
Would you have believed it? Or would you have thought we were patronizing you? Sometimes the only way to learn something is to live it. Darius considered this, then laughed, a sound that would have seemed impossible 6 months ago. You played me like a Rigelian strategy board. And you became a master of the game. Look what we built together. She pulled up statistics on her device. Interspecies combat incidents down 80%. Training injuries reduced by 60%. Cross-species military cooperation up 300%. We changed the academy, she said. Maybe the whole military. Because you were brave enough to learn from humiliation and strong enough to teach others what you learned. Manipulation and inspiration aren't mutually exclusive, Darius admitted. Though I demand one concession. Name it. At graduation, when we present the curriculum to the full Admiralty, we tell them everything, including how it started. Lena grinned. You want to publicly admit you were a training prop? I want to publicly demonstrate that anyone can grow. That strength isn't about never falling. It's about what you do after you fall. 3 days later, in front of the assembled Admiralty and thousands of recruits, they did exactly that. Darius himself presented the security footage, narrating his own humiliation with clinical detachment. The crowd was silent, then erupted in discussion when he revealed the orchestration. This is the final lesson, Darius said, his voice carrying across the amphitheater. Humans are strategic thinkers. They plan not just battles, but entire campaigns of understanding. They manipulated me. Yes. But they did it to make me better. To make all of us better. He gestured to Lena. She could have left me broken in that mess hall. Instead, she and Commander Ralcor turned my failure into the foundation of something greater. That's human thinking. They see potential where others see problems. Admiral Karek, an ancient Kandorian whose crystalline form was more monument than being, rose to speak. This admission of deception troubles me. How can we trust beings who manipulate so easily? Lena stood to answer. Because we're admitting it. We could have kept this secret forever. Instead, we're showing you exactly how we think, how we plan, how we turn conflict into cooperation. That's not deception. That's transparency about our methods. The question, Commander Ralcor added, is not whether humans can manipulate. Any intelligent species can. It's what they choose to do with that ability. They chose to build bridges instead of weapons. The Admiralty voted unanimously to implement the curriculum galaxy-wide. After the ceremony, as recruits and officers mingled in the reception hall, Darius found himself standing with Lena on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. So what now? He asked. The program is launched. The truth is known. What's the next manipulation? No more manipulations, Lena said. Now we do the hard work of genuine cooperation. Though, she smiled. I did put your name forward for the advanced instructor position on the new training station. You'd be lead coordinator for all non-human instructors. Without asking me, would you have said no? Darius considered. No. but I would have negotiated better terms. That's why I also put you down for the salary I knew you'd negotiate to, not the starting offer.
You're terrifying.
I'm human. We're all terrifying. We just choose to be terrifying in constructive ways. They stood in comfortable silence, watching stars that represented thousands of worlds, millions of species, all learning to work together despite their differences. That thing you said in your first lesson, Darius said eventually.
About humans being collectively unstoppable.
You meant more than just humans, didn't you? I did. Humans are collectively unstoppable because we make everyone part of our collective. We find the strength in every species, every individual, and we figure out how to make it part of something bigger. And if someone refuses to be part of that collective, Lena's expression hardened slightly. Then we stop being teachers and become what our evolution made us. But that's the last resort, never the first. A group of new recruits passed by. A mix of species Darius had never seen together before the program started. They were arguing about something, but it was academic, not hostile. One made a joke, and they all laughed, or made their species equivalent.
Look at that, Lena said softly. 6 months ago, half of them would have been trying to establish dominance through violence. Now, they're establishing it through humor and intelligence.
Because a human grabbed a saurian's shoulder and changed everything.
Because a saurian was smart enough to learn from it.
Darius extended his fist, and Lena bumped it with hers. The gesture had spread throughout the academy, adapted by different species in different ways, but always meaning the same thing, respect between equals. Same time tomorrow, Lena asked. We need to review the applications for next semester's advanced course. 0600, Darius confirmed. I'll bring the coffee. My addiction has corrupted you. Your addiction has taught me that sometimes the most dangerous beings in the galaxy are the ones who need stimulants, just to be social before noon. She laughed, and he joined her, a human and a saurian. Proof that the galaxy's most different species could not just coexist, but thrive together. Later, in his quarters, Darius began writing his memoir about the experience. The first line came easily. If there's one thing I learned from being humiliated by a human half my size, it's this: never underestimate someone who looks weak, especially when they come from a planet that's been trying to kill them for 4 billion years. The book would become required reading at military academies across the galaxy. But that night, it was just a saurian trying to capture the moment everything changed, because someone was clever enough to orchestrate his education and kind enough to become his friend afterward. The title practically wrote itself, Grab the Wrong Arm, A Warrior's Guide to Human Friends. And in her own quarters, Lena Carter filed her report to Earth's military command with a simple summary: integration successful. The galaxy is ready to learn what humans really are, not conquerors, not victims, but teachers who happen to be very, very good at applied education. The mess hall where it all started had become something of a shrine. New recruits would sit at that corner table under the broken light, hoping to understand the moment that changed military history. The light never got fixed. Some things were better left broken, as reminders that from breaks can come the strongest bonds. And every morning at 0600, a human and a saurian would meet to plan the future, armed with coffee and the knowledge that sometimes the best manipulations are the ones that make everyone better, even the ones being manipulated. The shoulder never did fully stop aching in cold weather, but Darius considered it a fair price for wisdom. After all, as humans say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Even if what doesn't kill you is a 5'3" human woman who orchestrated your entire personal growth while drinking toxic beverages and calling it friendship. Especially then,